Hey everyone, this is Zach here. Today I'm going to walk through an example using Ansible to automate taking screenshots or screen captures with Selenium. And this example came out of a conversation I was having with a customer where they're discussing how they could potentially satisfy some of their audit and compliance requirements when they're doing patching process of mission critical systems and they need to have some form of attestation. And ideally, we could leverage Ansible modules to do things like checking the status of services to confirm uptime and things along those lines. But in some cases where the requirements are that you have, screen or image evidence, screenshots are the way that customers fulfill those requirements, and that often is pretty tedious manual effort. So I set out a mission to see could I do this with Ansible? Could I generate a sufficient screenshot for the target application, and could I do that in a portable fashion? And what I mean by that is not require someone to set up a machine in their environment that has the requirements to run something like Selenium to do that browser automation. So the three big pieces of this demonstration are going to be: one, the execution environment that I built to encapsulate the requirements to do this work, and then I have a playbook, right, which is ultimately going to be used to invoke a Selenium script. And then lastly, and very important, is the Python Selenium script that I've written, leveraging the Selenium SDK. And I tried to keep the Selenium script simple because, again, in the spirit of Ansible, simplicity is a very important piece of this. And when it comes to truly just taking a screenshot of an application with Selenium, the script can be kept relatively simple. So I'm going to walk through those three components today and give you a demonstration of how this can be done. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to look at the execution environment. So feel free to, please, of course, read through the blog post, but I'm going to go straight to the source here, which has documentation in my repository. And in here, I've actually just placed the execution environment in the README itself, the definition file. There's a publicly available image that you could actually pull down to test and play around with. But the definition file is included here to where you could, of course, modify it or extend it to suit your needs. And you'll notice I have a couple of collections specifically for my demo where I'm going to do an integration with ServiceNow as well, just to help enhance the workflow. But if I scroll down, there's a couple of important steps in my additional build steps that are going to enable Selenium to run. So Selenium does require a browser and the drivers to interact with said browser. So you'll notice here I have a couple steps where I actually am injecting the repo configuration for Google Chrome during the build process of the image, and then I actually do DNF install. In this case, I'm using a variable, but DNF install of Google Chrome stable into the image itself. And then this last piece here is actually the work that's going to be done to install the driver, right? So we have the browser itself, and then we have the drivers, which Selenium are going to leverage to automate the browser. And the way that Google publishes the Chrome driver is they actually have a site that gives you a JSON payload back that has a lot of information about the various versions and then links to download it. So there's this kind of complicated curl command where I'm piping it through to JQ, ultimately just extracting a link that I can use to download the latest driver. And you'll see that I then do curl it, I unzip it, I put it where I want it, and then ultimately I'm cleaning some things up. So I don't actually need the image to have unzip or JQ in it. So that is a one-liner to do all those things, and ultimately what you'll have is the driver and user local bin within the image. And the benefit of doing this all within the image is I can now run this execution environment anywhere. I don't need to have a machine in my environment that has Selenium installed, that has Chrome and Chrome driver. This execution environment can run anywhere, and it has everything it needs baked into it. So the next thing that's worth looking at is, if I scroll back up here, is the playbook and the script. So I'll start with the playbook to show you how an Ansible playbook can be written to then invoke the Python script. And the steps I have here are actually a little bit more than that. So I wanted to simulate a scenario. So what I'm leveraging is we actually have a new automation dashboard out in Tech Preview. So I have that spun up in my environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate taking that down. And I'm using the systemd service module to stop that service. And what I'll then do is I'm going to create a ServiceNow incident, right? Just to simulate, hey, there's an issue in my environment. I want to create an incident to track the work. So I go ahead and create a ServiceNow incident. I then am going to simulate a remediation. So in this case, it's as simple as restarting the service because I just took it down. But in this case, we'll see I'm going to bring the application back up. And this is where you may need some sort of attestation, right? To be able to close that incident out, you need to prove that you actually have the application back up and running. And the systemd service status is not always sufficient. So I'm having a quick pause in there to make sure the application starts up completely. And then what I do is I'm setting myself up to take a screenshot. So I use the built-in temp file module to create a directory. And I then invoke my Selenium script. So we'll take a look at this script in a moment. But the important things are here is that Ansible is just going to run the Python script. And I can pass variables using the environment keyword at the task level. And so that's how I'm going to pass variables from Ansible into the script itself, is just using environment variables. And two things I'm passing are, in this particular case, the automation dashboard and tech preview uses basic auth. And so I'm passing in the admin password so that I can log in and take a screenshot. And then I'm also passing in that directory, which is temporarily created, which will tell Python script where to place the image that it takes. And one thing to keep in mind is because this is all happening in an execution environment, this image is effectively going to get blown away when this job finishes. So the last piece of the playbook is actually to add that evidence to a ServiceNow incident so it persists, right? And I'm using ServiceNow as an example. You could put this evidence anywhere, right? So if you just have a simple web server, you could just drop an image on that web server, which then could be referred to later on. It could be put in something like a SharePoint or a shared drive, just somewhere that image persists, because if you don't, it will just get blown away with the execution environment. And then the last step there is just to move it to a closed state. So now let's take a look at what that actual Python script looks like, called Selenium Automation Dashboard. So if I go to the scripts folder here. So in total, this script is just 36 lines, right? And if you're familiar with Python, kind of the first 10 here, I'm doing some imports leveraging the Selenium framework. So that's Selenium SDK that is available for Python. In this first section here, I'm setting up the options for creating my Chrome instance. So that's in any Selenium script, you're first going to create a web driver. In this case, I'm interacting with Chrome. If you want to leverage something like Firefox or even Edge or Safari, you could do that as well. But you'll see here, I'm setting some options specifically. If you have a app that you're trying to test that doesn't have a valid certificate, these two options become very handy. Otherwise, your screenshot will likely just be the browser telling you have an invalid cert. But once you get that set up, the meat of the work is actually in this block, and I honed in on that in the blog post itself. But what we're doing here is, once we've gotten our driver, we now have the ability to just go and get a URL. So in this case, I am using a URL which is in my home lab environment. I'm leveraging that admin password that I passed in from Ansible. So this OST environment.get was how I extract an environment variable that I passed through. In this case, I'm using a quote function because I had some special characters in my password, so just something you may run into, may not be necessary at all. And then I'm using the basic auth in the URL to do the authentication. Definitely probably not recommended for a production application. If you have an application that requires login, you can leverage Selenium to get the URL and then actually enter keys into the form fields to put your username and password in and actually click login. So that's all possible with Selenium, and it's not too complicated. So the next piece is here is I'm actually going to do a couple of waits. So I'm basically confirming that the browser is up and ready. And so the way the Selenium works is it's processing the DOM. And if you're not super familiar with the DOM in a web browser, if you were to look at like the source code behind a web page, it's going to be an HTML document object model, which is what the DOM stands for, and it's going to have kind of nested tags. It feels like XML. And so what these waits are doing is they're looking for particular elements within that model and confirming that they're visible, right? So that's what this, wait until visibility of element located. So nothing too crazy of what I'm doing. I'm just making sure the app element, which is kind of like the parent element for this particular web page. And then the second thing I'm looking for is a particular button that has the text share as PDF. And the reason why I'm doing that is because for my application specifically, that is an indicator that my page is loaded. So those steps might be slightly different for an application that you are testing against. But once that's complete, I go ahead and grab the element, the app, because that's my all-encompassing element. For many common web pages, you can always do by tag and actually grab the body tag, which is the wrapper of a web page, and that will give you a screenshot of effectively the whole page. But once I've grabbed the element, I can do a dot screenshot. Again, I'm referencing that environment variable pass through, and then I add a static file name, so automation dashboard.png. And if that succeeds, I'm going to close out my driver no matter what, but if it fails, I'll go ahead and write out an error, which can be exposed to me through the Ansible logs as well. But that's the comprehensive Selenium script to do kind of a basic screenshot. It can honestly even be more simple than that if you just want to grab the body tag and take a screenshot. You don't necessarily need any of these weights. The weights can help with stability of the script itself, right? So in different environments, if an app is a little bit slower to load than in others, those weights can help your script be a little bit more flexible. So now let's take a quick look at what the automation dashboard looks like. So this is my application. And what I'm going to do is I'll run the demo, and it's going to take this down temporarily, sudo remediate it, and then take a screenshot and create a ServiceNow ticket to track the process. So I'm going to go over into my Ansible automation platform, go ahead and log in here, and I'm going to go to my templates, and I'm going to search for Selenium, and I've got this automation dashboard script. So kick that off, and as you can see, it's already started with, it's going to simulate application down, so that's doing the systemd service stop of the automation dashboard. And if I were to go over and just try to reload the application, it obviously wouldn't load. It goes in and creates the ServiceNow incident, restarts the service, and then you see we have our little pause here to just make sure that the dashboard comes back up. And ultimately, it'll run that script, which is super quick, to take a screenshot and then upload it to the ServiceNow ticket. So we have success here. So let's go over to ServiceNow, and let's take a look at incidents. Let's look at all of them. So you'll see there's an incident right here just created. So June 13th at 9:02. I'll click on that incident, and voila, we can see this is the screenshot that Ansible took of my automation dashboard, confirming that it was up and ready. So I hope you enjoyed that demo. I think it's a pretty cool way to leverage Ansible and automate some of those things that may not be typically thought of as part of an Ansible process, and hopefully eliminate you from having to do this manually, because I don't think anyone actually enjoys taking screenshots. As always, drop a note in the comments if you have any questions, and thank you for watching.